So the reason Australia has no culture is because colonial identity and cultural development are mutually exclusive. They cannot coexist for the simple reason that they have opposite intentions. You see, upholding colonial identity while also trying to develop a deep culture is like trying to mix oil and water, because to develop culture you need to remember, commemorate and celebrate history. Learning from history is the basis of all cultural development. But colonial identity is entirely built on erasing history, to hide the crimes of genocide and land theft that every colonial power structure is built on. All colonial identity is built on idolatry, not history. It's George Washington having never told a lie. It's the legend of the Anzac Spirit, Vimy Ridge, the Great Trek of the Boers. It's the prevailing colonial narrative that Indigenous people were all primitive, or that the settler colonists were mostly peaceful people, and all the slavery and Indigenous genocide and land theft were just misunderstandings from people who were otherwise good and just didn't know any better. But all of that is mythology, not history. A story invented to justify the colonies and their violent extraction and exploitation of Indigenous people and their land and resources, which ultimately is what every single colonial project is about. And that story is so fragile that merely explaining real history is enough to generate anger and rage from its strongest supporters. And because real history is erased in colonial narratives to uphold that colonial fantasy, that means no real history is being remembered or learned from. And so, no culture grows. That's why no matter how much time passes, Australian culture never goes deeper than fairy bread, Vegemite barbecues and football, because our history is forever retconned to fit the colonial identity and uphold its power structures, specifically those of capitalism, patriarchy and racism. It's also why we get weird, surreal cultural moments like how Australia celebrates Christmas with a snowy winter reindeer-filled theme, despite the fact Christmas here happens in the middle of scorching hot summer. That colonial identity is so fragile, it doesn't even dare invent its own cultural events. It just transplants European culture in its entirety. And clinging onto that colonial identity is a problem for everyone. For Indigenous people, it means the colonial power structures built on their oppression and cultural erasure still hold political power over their everyday lives. And for us colonizers, it means we can never grow as a people. We're forever doomed to a shallow, fragile, racist identity that refuses to challenge itself or face reality. And so we're all stuck here together in limbo until decolonization and land back happens. And it is really worth your time to learn what that actually means, instead of having a defensive reaction to it, because that's just your colonial identity talking. Once you learn what decolonization actually is, you'll see that it is much about your liberation as everyone else's. Anyway, something to think about.